Hi everyone, welcome and happy Halloween. Hope you have some fun things planned at school today. I'm Shala from Team Vidagami and I'm here with Nicole Hammond, our professional development trainer and yearbook guru. So just a quick recap for new advisors with us. Back in 2017, Picaboo Yearbooks and Vidagami teamed up to offer schools a great way to privately and collaboratively store, share, and curate their photos in one secure place so they can flow right into the editor to create all kinds of publications, particularly the yearbook. So just a quick background about Nicole, who's going to be hosting today's session. In addition to teaching English and journalism, she's had over 20 years of experience working in the yearbook industry, advised an award-winning yearbook at her school. She's worked with Balfour, led a number of workshops in the country, and she's been with the Creators Studio team for over 5 years now. So now she's designed this series to give us the basics of building and rolling out the yearbook. So we opened up season 2 this August with a bit of a roadmap, as well as a rundown of some of the new features we've released. If you haven't seen them yet, be sure to check them out. In this round, we're going back to basics. So Nicole, please tell us what we're going to be covering today.
All right, we're going back to the foundation and we're going to look at the rules of layout design. Some of you are really seasoned advisors and you know what good layout design is, but maybe you need a new way to teach that to your staff. You are possibly a brand new advisor with background in English or in photography, but maybe not in design. Or maybe you are here as somebody who, God bless you, is taking on the yearbook, but has absolutely no background in any of it. So this is our foundation. We're going to learn the basic rules of design. It won't be all of them, but it will be the fundamentals that we really need to get started. And hopefully, when you are finished here, you'll have something you can take back to your staff. And also, when you open up the editor and you're staring at a blank spread, it won't seem as daunting because knowing the rules will really give you a place to start. So that's what we're looking at today. And then for the next several webinars, we'll be building on what we learned. So first, we're taking a look here at a completed layout. And without even knowing the rules of design, you can know that this is a good layout. But what we really want to get to is why. What makes it a good layout and how can you do that yourself? So there are several terms here in design that we're going to define. And then we're going to look at the editor. We're going to take that blank spread and we're going to create our own. So you'll see our gutter up here at the top. That's the center of our spread where the pages go into the spine. We've got white space, dominant photo, internal margin, eyeline, headline treatment, and then column design. So it seems like a lot of rules, but let's look at each one of the elements by themselves. So the first is white space. You're going to stare at a blank page and that could panic you, or if you know what you're supposed to be doing, that just gives you the freedom to create. We want to make sure though that we're not filling every single bit of space with text or pictures. We need some place for our eyes to go to rest. So white space is the absence of elements in an area on a spread, and we use it intentionally and we can use it on purpose. You'll notice just small blocks of white space on this spread. They're around the outside of the spread and they're balanced on either side of the spread. It's a very visual spread. There's a lot of color and a lot of text, and those just give our eyes someplace to go or a break. Dominant photo. When you're designing, the first element you want to place is that big dominant photo. It can be square, it can be a rectangle, it can be horizontal, it can be vertical, but we're going to place that element and then we're going to kind of design around it. It's one large photo, at least double the size of the next largest element, and it's carefully placed to draw the reader's eye in. You may not know what photo is going to go in this spot, but you want that spot reserved for what is going to be the best photo of your spread. The internal margin. If you have been in our editor at all, you know that we have a big red line around the outside of our book, and then a little bit in, about 1 inch, is the purple margin line, and we tell you that the white space in between those two lines is the margin, and that's the external margin. But inside each spread, we have internal margins. It's the amount of space between the elements on a spread. So the amount of space we have in between each photo, the amount of space we have in between text columns, the amount of space we have in between a photo and its caption, That's our internal margin, and it should all be the same. In yearbook, that's usually 1 pica, and our pica is our unit of measure. And we keep 1 pica in between all of those elements so that everything is spaced evenly. There's an eye line on every spread. And after we finish here, I'm going to challenge you to go open up a magazine or any type of photo book you might have around. Open it up and see if you can't find all of these things in here, because these are the elements of good design. You should be able to find them anywhere. So the eye line is literally a line that draws your eye. It draws it across the spread. It can be an actual line, like a stroke that you put across the page, or implied, like we've done here with just our white space using the internal margin, but it runs across the spread. It's never dead center in the spread. It's above or below the center, usually at 1/3 or 2/3 above or below the center of the spread. We have a headline treatment. We'll have our headline, and a headline needs to include an action verb, and then the subhead is grouped with it to introduce an article. And then the last thing we have is our column design. And when you're looking at the spread, you can see if we've used 2, 3, or 4 columns on each page to design our spread. And you'll notice that in this spread, we have 2 columns. We have 2 text columns. The photos run so that there is an internal margin that meets up with that column in the right-hand page. On the left-hand page, we have that same 2-column format. It's just that our dominant photo has gone across that column line or the internal margin, but this has been created in a 2-column format. And one of the options in the editor under Advanced is to change your column size, and we can take a look at that. So these are basic design layout rules, the things that we need to see in a spread and we need to be careful and cognizant of. So we'll move a little bit beyond the basic rules, and these are by no means the exhaustive rules or design elements of a layout, and they are also not rules that cannot be broken intentionally. Once you know the rules of good layout and design, you might break one on purpose, but generally we don't break more than one on a spread. And these beyond the basic that I'm showing you here, again, not the only ones, but these are the ones we want to deal with today. These are the most common, and these are the ones that will really get you started on creating your layout and that you'll be able to use with your students to create their layouts. So once we've got those basics down, then we can start to flesh out the design of our layout. So we've maybe put in all of the text boxes and we've put in the image placeholders. Now that we're going to fill them, there are some rules that we want to pay attention to. One element we might want to add is a sidebar, and we're going to want that sidebar to be an article that highlights or explains a portion of what's in the main article and the spread information. Here you see quotes. Maybe it's a poll or a survey. Maybe it's items from a sport that people aren't very familiar with, and you're showing those items and highlighting the definitions of them so that the article makes more sense. But a sidebar is one way to get all of that information in without making your readers read too much copy or making your spread copy dense. Next, we don't want the photos to look off the page. So this is not a rule that we pay attention to when we're setting up our image placeholders or our layouts. But as we're intentionally placing photos, you'll notice that on the left-hand side of the spread, all 3 girls who are serving are facing the gutter. You'll notice that on the right-hand side, the one girl waiting to receive the serve, she's facing the gutter. The girl who is on the ground diving for the ball, while she's not facing the gutter, she is facing copy, and she's not facing the cut or trim line of the page. We never want our reader's eye to look off the page. So we always want to draw them to another element that's on our spread, and we need to pay attention to that even in the placement of our photos. You can look at a spread and you can see if it's too cluttered. If your eye is really having trouble settling, try taking a few of those photos away and making the ones that remain larger. That's not to say that there's not a place for collages in a yearbook. Absolutely. We all know that we want as many photos as possible, and collages are great. On a spread where you have photos and text and articles and captions, you will want to limit the photos, but I can't give you a hard and fast rule. Just if it looks like it's too many, try reducing and resizing and see if that's more pleasing to your eye. We want the captions to always be next to their photos. We should never have to guess what photo a caption is explaining, and we should never have to wonder what is going on in a photo because we don't see the caption right there to explain it for us. And just like we don't want the photos to look off the page, we don't want our copy to feel like it's trapped inside the page. So you'll notice that all of the copy, whether it's a caption or a headline or an article, it is never boxed in by photos or by photos and the gutter. It always left room to escape, basically. So the headline and the article can escape from the top of the spread. All of these captions could escape out the side, for lack of a better word, but our copy is always outside and never trapped inside. There should never be photos all the way around it or photos and gutter.
How do you set the internal margins on a page?
That is a really good question. Let's go into the editor because I can show that first and then we can answer the other one. So I've already opened up our blank spread in our PYB University book that we've been working on. And here I am staring at my blank spread that I need to create a layout for. And I've already turned on my advanced grids and guides. And you'll see here that my grid lines are set to picas and my columns are set to 8. And I can choose to change that. Now that's 8 across my spread, which is a 4-column page. So when I set my internal margin, I'm going to pay attention to these tiny boxes. Those are each 1 pica. And I'm going to make sure when I drop my images or text boxes that I am lining them up so that this 1 pica is in between them. You can choose to make your internal margin larger if you want. 1 pica is the standard, so that's what I'm going to use in our sample. There's not a way in our editor to set it so that everything is automatically 1 pica apart, but as long as you have these grid lines turned on, you'll be able to do that yourself as you're setting up. So here's what I'd love to do. We're going to create a spread and use those rules. I'm starting with my dominant photo. Do I want it to be a rectangle, a square? Do I want it to be horizontal or vertical? And do you want it to rest below or above the center? First person to tell me shape of the image, I'll put that on.
Got rectangle.
Okay. All right, let's add a placeholder. Do I want it to be above or below the center? Above. Everybody says
above.
Oh, let's go all the way across the gutter. All right, so because I have put it above and I don't want to break too many of the rules that I have just given you, we're going to leave our eye line right here below the picture. So how many more images do I want to have in this spread? Somebody give me a number. I've got 3. So here's my first trick. I really kind of want my images to vary in size, but I kind of want to keep the shape close. So I'm just going to copy and paste this image and reduce the size. Remember, I'm keeping my eye line.
Does the size change uniformly, Nicole, when you just drag it from the corners?
When I drag from the corners, it keeps my shape the same. If I drag from the centers, it will change the ratio. That's the word I'm looking for. So yes. when I resize from here, it will keep the ratio the same. When I resize from the center, it will change my ratio and will change the shape. So that's a good thing to point out. All right, I've got one here. I'm gonna copy this one and add it here.
We also have another comment in here. Shouldn't the number of photos depend on how much copy you have?
Not necessarily. In journalism, and this we're gonna talk about in the next webinar, so stay tuned. We write in what we call an inverted pyramid style. So it means, unlike creative writing or fiction, you write so that the most important information is introduced first, and as you go along, the facts that you give are less and less important and relevant, because copy editors for newspapers, yearbooks, for any type of journalism, they cut from the bottom. They do not read the copy to find out what they need to cut. They cut from the bottom, and they can do that because they know that their writers have written the 5 W's, the who, what, when, where, why, at the beginning, and that if they cut from the bottom, they won't remove anything important. So we don't necessarily set up with the amount of copy in mind. And the other thing to remember too is that we are preserving memories for a generation of kids who are used to sound bites, and they are used to getting their information in 140 characters. So while I absolutely believe that articles in yearbooks are important and relevant, we want to tell the stories of what happened during the year, we don't want them to be so copy heavy that people won't be reading. And also, we don't have to keep this layout exactly as is if we find that we need to change it. As long as we're still following the rules, we don't need to worry about the layout being changed once we say we've finished it. So I'm going to do one more. This one, I'm actually going to resize. I could let this go off the page if I wanted to. We could bleed that. We don't want to bleed too many elements on a page. Less is more. So we've got 4 photos on this spread, and we're very heavy up here. So I think it's good that we're going to leave a little bit of white space down here, and we're going to need to set our text boxes. Now you won't be able to see the text box filled out completely unless I just keep doing this and so on. It would continue, and we might have a small block of white space here, and if we end up with that, I'll put one in the corresponding corner over here. Now here I have a choice. I can stack these 2 captions because this one belongs here, and I could stack the one that goes here beside it, or I could put it underneath. If I'm going to put the ones for these 2 photos underneath, then it would make sense to put them all together. If I plan to put the other ones up here, I might want to leave this as white space, and that then will depend on my article. And I can only put them up here if what's above it will be copy. If I put a photo here and then add my captions, that would be trapped. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to put this right here. These lines that you see appearing are letting you know that this text block is lined up on the same line as the photo above it, and it's lined up on that pica line that I want it to be on. Again, you'll see it's lined up with the text box on the left-hand side, so I can be confident that we've kept our internal margin. And I'm also lining these up with the edges of their photos so that I leave that internal margin even with the text. I'm going to want to put a headline up here.
What's a good size for captions, Nicole, usually?
So usually we try to do between 12 and 14 point for articles and 10 to 12 for captions. You don't want to go so small that they have a hard time reading it, or so large that you can't put enough information in. But the biggest rule really for captions and copy is the readability of the font. So there are serif fonts and sans serif fonts, and the sans serif fonts are the ones that don't have the little tails or the curly cues on each letter. So something like an Arial or a Helvetica would be a sans serif font. And those are great when your font size is smaller, like for caption or copywriting. You can go fancy with your serif fonts for a headline or a subhead when the point size is going to be much larger. So I'm going to edit my text. Now, we have some new text features that we're going to highlight in the next webinar, but this 36-point headline might have been a problem for me earlier, but now I can space that so that I can fit it all on one line if I want to. Maybe that's a little too small. We could go a little larger. And let's try something that's a little more fun than Arial. See, this is fun. And if this is my headline, I would want to put a subhead underneath it, and it could be the same font. It could be the same font family. I could do a bold on my headline and an italic on my subhead. And then my copy would be in this block here. And I can add the text box, but it won't show you how big it would be. But I would line that up here. And then that would be my 2-column format. Now I've still got my white space here. I can maybe make my headline 2 lines, move my subhead over here, and my article down. And this is also what can be done once you've created the article, once you have found some photos to put in there. But as a basic format, I have my eyeline, I have my dominant photo, I have my other images. My captions are not trapped and they are all with the image that they are discussing. I have a headline and a subhead together, and I have my article laid out here. None of my copy is trapped. This is a very basic layout, and one that could be advanced and modified and repositioned. It could be flipped so that the article is on the left-hand page and the dominant photo is on the right, or it could be flipped horizontally so that the article and the dominant photo are at the bottom and the 3 smaller photos are at the top. So once you get a good base for your layouts, that's a quick way to create some new ones without going back to square one. And then once you have these fundamentals down, you can start adding in other elements or getting a little more advanced. You might break the eyeline rule by pulling one photo across the eyeline, and maybe you have it cutting into the dominant photo. The ones that we really don't ever break are the rules about trapped copy, captions not touching or being next to the photos that they are describing, and photos looking off the page. Don't break those rules.
If telling history and you mention a place and then add that related photo, would you also add a caption adjacent to the photo?
Yes, if you're following the rules of layout design and yearbook journalism, then yes, if you mention a location in an article, but you then show a photo of that location, you would still add a caption. And in the next webinar, we're going to go over headline and caption writing and copywriting. So what are the rules for writing a caption? What are the rules for the inverted pyramid style that I discussed? And we'll go over all of those rules. But yes, that's a great question. You would definitely add both of them in. Today in the handout, we've created a lesson plan based on today's webinar that you can use with your staff. And there are PDFs that you can download and print out and use. It will ask your students to identify all of the same terms that we identified in the beginning, and then ask them to create their own layout using those layout and design rules, and then critique each other after they've created those layouts. It does say to show them the webinar in the beginning, so that's a great thing to do. Show them the webinar so that they understand, or maybe even just the beginning where the definitions and rules are gone through, and then let them do it on their own to learn. And we'll be doing one of those lessons for each one of these Back to Basics webinars.
Thanks so much, Nicole. I'm just going to run through some final housekeeping before we start wrapping things up. Be sure to keep in touch with your client success specialist if you have any additional questions. Contact support via phone, email, or the knowledge base. Have an amazing Halloween, everyone, and we'll see you in the next round.
Right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.